to me or one of my colleagues, and we would love to speak with you. So my talk, I've entitled it Social Engineering, Communication Skills for Technical People, and I'll get into what I mean by that very shortly. First, I'd like to talk a bit about stereotypes. As we said in my introduction, I was not originally a software developer, but a marketer. And like a lot of marketers, I was not expected to be technical. I actually remember one day on the job, I saw that one of my tasks, which was to literally count tweets like in a Twitter feed one by one, could be done much more easily with the Twitter API. I told this to one of my colleagues, and she told me, that's not your job. That's too hard. You shouldn't spend time on that. Technical work isn't what we do marketing. So conversely, I spent a little bit of time this year doing contract work as a software developer. I was working with a client, and one of my fellow software developers, who was just fine at his job, failed to join client calls. His email responses were extremely trite or non-existent, and eventually he was fired. I asked him about this, and he told me, well, going to meetings isn't my job. This talking to clients thing, I'm not good at it. It's not what I do. I'm here to write code. So, my whole point is, basically, we as software developers, we don't work in a void anymore. We're not just by ourselves hacking on a mainframe. And as marketers, even, I don't know if any of you here are marketers, but for the business folks around you, they also don't work in a void either. Both sides are being brought down by these stereotypes and these bias that exist that says you're not good at technology or you're not good at communication. And if we do want to hack the planet and we do want to take over the world, these days as programmers we need communication skills just like the business folks do. So what are some fun things that we can do with awesome communication skills in programming? I mean, one is the title of my presentation, social engineering. So as some of you probably know, that is a term in the security world for an attack that goes through an individual. So if you can convince someone, say, that you are there to repair their servers and they'll let you into the server room, that is social engineering, and you can attack and mess with all of their stuff. And that's communication. Of course, there are other things that go along with that, such as getting job promotions, working together as part of a team. Again, we're on GitHub, commenting on each other's posts. We become more effective when we are better communicators. And the big picture here in great communication is setting expectations. So when our expectations are met, there's actually a physiological response in the brain. Dopamine is released and we get happy. But when expectations aren't met, there's actually a greater drop in dopamine than the high we would have gotten if our expectation was met. So this is essentially how to not piss people off. Also getting what you want, like in a social engineering attack, but really what we're doing is making people around you happy. And when the people around you are happy, your coworkers are happy, your boss is happy, we're able to work more efficiently. All right. So getting into the technical portion of my non-technical. This is actually the Merriam-Webster definition of communication, a process by which information is exchanged through a common set of symbols, signs, or behavior. So what does that sound like? It sounds like code. So we as technical people, whether or not we have any sort of non-technical background, actually have those skills, those native skills to be great communicators. We're doing this all of the time with computers. We know a common set of symbols, which is our programming language, and we're communicating with a computer, which now, with human language, is the human brain. So these are things we're already good at if we apply them. So human language. We use different symbols to communicate, but the same principles. This is the same thing with programming languages. Some of us code in Ruby, like we do here at Springus. Some of us use JavaScript, C, Objective-C, whatever it is that is the flavor of what you code in. But the same principles apply. Object orientation, basic best practices of coding. So what I'm getting at here is a lot of people in this room are probably not English native speakers, probably more Dutch, but that's okay. These same especially if you're trying to communicate more clearly in a foreign language. Okay, so first point of discussion is jargon. For those of you in the back, this comic is essentially, I think we should build a SQL database. Uh-oh, does he understand what he said, or is it something he saw in a trade magazine ad? What color do you want that database? I think mom has the most RAM. Yes, okay. So especially as technical people, it's almost like being in the medical field. We have a lot of terms that we no longer realize do not apply to anyone else in our group. When I actually started my first programming job, I was coming straight out of marketing, and I got it by hustling, not by skill of any kind. I went up to my boss and said, I'll help you with marketing if for half the time you let me hack away at your code base. And she said, okay, fine, I'll pay you nothing. And I was like, great, sounds good. So first day on the job, she goes, all right, can you open your terminal and pull down our code base from our GitHub repository? And I was like, oh, my terminal? GitHub repository? And I kind of freaked out a bit, asked her to explain, and then she explained what those things were with other, also technical language. And by the time we got it to a point where I could understand, I think she was really regretting hiring me. So, what can we do to help this problem, to help us communicate with people who might not understand our technical jargon, or maybe our junior coworkers who know a lot of the jargon, but not all of the jargon yet? So one thing is just being aware. My boss at my last company often was very unaware when she used very technical terms. She was a former Amazon engineer. She had gone to school for computer science and always been around technical people. When you're surrounded by it all the time, it's easy to forget what parts of our language are technical. And two, know your audience. So when you think about, well, what could I say instead, also think about who you're talking to. Are you talking to a business person at your company who speaks in their jargon? So maybe they'll express their thoughts in language like an ROI or a KPI, figure out what those mean. Or are you trying to explain something to your CEO or your grandmother? Pick your language based on your audience. And three, so a practical tip actually, if you're going about trying to improve this skill in day-to-day life, make a little translator for yourself. You could even create a little command line tool and save these things and pull it up whenever you need to. So something like, okay, now I've realized that grandma doesn't understand what a database is. How would I explain that to her? An IP address. Well, okay, if I'm talking to the kid down the street, maybe I'll call it something like your computer's phone number. Just pick and choose and test out with folks that you're trying to communicate with, and keep a list. All right, so this is a task that I will have you do not now, but when you guys are eating and chatting afterwards. So without using any jargon whatsoever, no technical language, really be strict about yourself, describe what you did today to someone else in the group. So remember that and try it, and then I'll have you go home and call your grandmother and do the same thing. And then the key part about this exercise is once you have done this, ask them to explain it back to you and see if they actually understood what you were working on. Try again. Okay, the next part is fun, grammar and syntax. So how many of us have shot off a really important email to a really important person, 2 seconds later find out there's a grammatical mistake in it? Oh my god. Anyway. Okay, so why was this horrifying? It makes us look stupid. It makes us feel dumb. It's like we just don't know what we're talking about or what we're doing. And that's horrible, especially for programmers when, you know, a lot of us, like, we know that we're smart, we know that we're capable, and we don't want to come across like we're not. So the beauty of grammar and syntax is that there are written, standardized guides about these things. We almost forget because we learn these things all the way back in high school or middle school or the equivalent in European countries. But this is the same as reading your documentation. I know whenever I sit down with the Ruby docs, I'll learn a new method and a new way to write something that I was doing before, but is now more efficient. It's now better. Maybe I was doing it wrong. Same thing goes for grammar. And if you really work on your vocabulary, resources to do this. There are some great websites that'll send you a word a day. Just find something you don't know and use it in everyday language, even if you feel like you sound like you're totally dumb. All right. The next point is tone. So tone is a fun one because it's a bit nebulous. You talk about the tone, and you know tone can be sarcastic or friendly or angry. But the word tone, what it literally means is like the pitch of your voice, how high it goes, how low it goes. And as software developers, we often are not speaking one-on-one with large groups of one-on-one with large groups of people. But in person, we're often writing emails. We're often responding to things on GitHub. We're often writing in text. So in order to improve our tone, we really have to, one, read things aloud. So you're not going to understand what you're writing sounds like until you literally speak it aloud to someone nearby. And one of the best things you can do, especially if you're writing in a language that is not your mother tongue, is to find someone who is a native speaker, and read it out loud to them and have them read it as well, because they'll understand nuances that you might not get right off the bat. So one example of this is when I was contracting this year, I was contracting for an American company who had a client that was based in the Netherlands, a Dutch company. And this was kind of hilarious because I realized that Americans are highly sensitive. We love to pad words and phrases with things that make us sound nicer and more polite and friendly, and we never like to say anything directly. So if your work is bad, we won't say it's bad. We'll maybe say, I think that there are some synergies that we can get out of rehashing this thing that you've done here, which has some great ideas in it. But I think we might want to go into a slightly different direction with your input, of course. So the Dutch company we're working with emails me and says, "This is bad, redo it." And I'm okay. And my boss, sort of freaking out, messages me like, "Are they angry? What's wrong? What do we need to do?" And this just kept happening over and over and over again. And I, planning on moving here, was kind of researching Dutch culture, and I realized this is just their tone. They're very direct. It's not that they're angry. But that made a huge deal in a business situation with someone from a different culture. Good thing to keep in mind. So the second best thing you can do to improve your tone is refactor. And the great thing about refactoring your writing is the same principles apply as with refactoring your code. So for example, like keeping methods short and single purpose, keep sentences short, single purpose, 8 to 12 words maximum. White space, always use white space. White space between paragraphs makes your writing much more readable. Use punctuation correctly and judiciously. There was a woman I worked with once who put ellipses after every single sentence in her emails, which may have been grammatically correct, but also made us all feel like she was expecting something. It was the weirdest thing. And formatting as well. So things like underlining and italics, bold, use them judiciously. Not all of the time, but only if they actually improve your point. So reflect is the next thing. When you write an email or anything online and you are emotional, it will come across in your tone, even if you think it won't. Best advice I can give is when you're writing something and emotional, never insert an email into the to field. Save the email for later, wait 24 hours, come back. It will improve your writing immensely. And then respond in a reasonable time frame. If you're speaking with someone in person, you're not going to wait like 10 minutes to answer their question. The same goes with writing. It will affect the tone, and if they think that you're angry or upset if you wait a long time. We have a rule here at Springist. If you can do something in 2 minutes, do it right away. If you can respond to something in 2 minutes, do it. If you can't, email them back right away. Give them a time estimate. Remember, it's about setting expectations. Let them know when they can get that information from you. So another exercise for you to do when you get home, pick a tone, friendly, angry, upset, awesome, feeling, whatever. understood the tone that you were going for. Okay. So now we loop back around to setting expectations. If we know how to write something, technically, how do we figure out what to say in a way that is most beneficial to us and those around us? So setting expectations, a big part of this when you're a software developer is letting people know how long things will take you. There are a lot of people in our organizations who don't understand what we do, and when they ask you to do a task, they don't have any internal sense of what it will take you to get from point A to point B. The first step in making these estimates is asking questions. So understand that people around you, whether they're in business or in tech, may not be great communicators. And most of the time, especially if they don't understand what you do, they're not. So clarify, what do you mean by this? When does this have to be done? Where does this need to go? Ask these questions right away. And 2 is practice saying, I'll get back to you. It is okay to not know things, no matter how scary your boss is. If they come to you and ask for an estimate on anything and you are even the slightest bit insecure, or even if you're not insecure, just practice saying, I will get back to you, or I don't know. Take the time to ask the questions and formulate a response before you answer. And 3rd one, something came up. So this is just continue communicating. In software development especially, we all know that sometimes when you dive into a project that you thought would take an hour, occasionally you discover bugs and rabbit holes, and now it's going to take you a week or a month or multiple projects. And the thing is, that's fine. It's part of our job. But also part of our job is communicating that to stakeholders. So sending those emails out as soon as you know, or setting those meetings so that those around you understand what to expect and can allocate resources. All right. So here's a question for the audience. What sort of questions would you need to ask when someone from your company says, can you update some website copy for me? Hands raised. Yes.
Is it just text?
Is it just text? That's a great one. Maybe they saw copy on an image, and now we need the Photoshop guy to Photoshop copy on this image before we put it on the website. That is a great question. Anyone else? Yes?
Did you ask the product owner?
Did you ask the product owner? Who needs to review this? Who told you that you're allowed to change this copy? That is great, because you as the developer will push that online, and now you've got the product owner coming over and saying, hey, how the heck did this get up here? That is a great question. All right, we have one more. Yes?
Is it our website?
Is it our website? So that especially, if you're in a very large company, there are people who probably are so disconnected from what you do, they may not understand which department they're going to or who they need to ask. If it's not something that you are responsible for, you should know that right away before you say yes. Lots of other questions, like, do I need to write this copy myself? How long will it take to deploy? Does it need to be tested? Really, the opportunities are endless for this to go from a 5-minute project to a week-long adventure. All right, so tomorrow's to-do list. These are things I would like you to do within the next 24 to 48 hours to get really awesome at communication, in addition to your awesome technical skills, and move towards world domination. All right. So one is call your grandmother. If you don't have a grandmother, call someone who is of equal technical skill to your grandmother. Explain to her or he what your latest project is and see if they can explain it back to you. Learn more about how you're using jargon. 2, read your docs. Just like you're reading your technical docs, your Ruby docs, whatever, pick up a dictionary, a thesaurus, a grammar guide, and read it, find something you didn't know or you forgot. Learn one new vocabulary word and use it. Read an email aloud. Really try to go for a specific tone too. So if you want to write a new email, pick something like friendly or angry and write the email in that tone and see if you got it right. Test it with someone. And then estimate coding time. Anything you're working on tomorrow, big or small, really time yourself. You can use a tool like Toggle maybe and track your time. Say this will take me 1 hour. From very start So the next point on here is SAT prep. If you're at all questioning your English grammar skills, which I do all the time, and I actually feel like I'm somewhat good at it, so there's just like this wealth of English grammar knowledge that I haven't touched in decades. Look up SAT prep, especially on Khan Academy, and you'll find a wealth of exercises that will help you improve your skills. Okay, and that is about it. Any questions from the audience? All right. Yes.
The emotional email still is in my head now. What if I'm a bit emotional trying to write an email, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And you say, just put it somewhere for 24 hours and then, but in the meantime you say, I'll get back to you about this?
That is a great
Because
question.
otherwise it just waits.
Depends how angry you are, actually. Yeah, if you feel like I'll get back to you is actually going to be said in an angry way, just wait the 24 hours and then the amount of damage we'll do will be lessened. But